3:31 a.m. Combat Information Center, USS Abraham Lincoln, Persian Gulf, the/spy. 6 radar has been painting the southern Iranian coastline for 11 consecutive days without a single anomalous return. At 3:31 a.m. and 14 seconds, that changes. Senior Chief Petty Officer Daniels is running the threat evaluation console when a thermal bloom erupts at Grid Kilo 7. A fixed terrain coordinate inside the Zagros mountain range that the Spy 6 has been using as a passive calibration reference since the Lincoln entered the Gulf. The system automatically classifies it as a ballistic missile launch and assigns it threat track 1147. Daniels overrides the classification in 2 keystrokes. The signature is not a launch. It is a sustained detonation sequence. Multiple secondary explosions stacking on top of each other inside an enclosed space, feeding on something with enormous fuel volume. The tactical action officer cross-references immediately with the E-2D Hawkeye orbiting at 24,000 feet above the strait. The Hawkeyes and /APS 145 radar has been in passive collection mode over Grid Kilo 7 since 2300 hours. Its process picture confirms what the Spy 6 thermal layer is already showing. Sequential cook-offs inside a sealed underground structure, expanding outward through the rock as each new fuel or munitions cache reaches ignition temperature. The thermal signature is not shrinking. It is growing. Whatever is burning inside, that mountain has enough fuel to keep burning for a long time. The commanding officer steps to the main display and requests B-2 egress confirmation from CENTCOM. The response arrives in 11 seconds. The B-2 cross back out Iranian airspace at 3:39 a.m. Strike package confirmed delivered. Both GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrators released on target. The aircraft is feet wet over the Gulf and climbing to cruise altitude for the long flight home to Whiteman Air Force Base. The commanding officer looks at the thermal bloom still expanding across Grid Kilo 7 on the main display. The facility that Iran spent 18 months building and 18 months denying has been burning for 43 seconds. It will burn for 11 more minutes. Go back, because what just happened at Grid Kilo 7 did not begin tonight. It began 22 months ago in a valley that Iran's most senior military commanders were certain nobody outside their own chain of command would ever find. They were wrong from the beginning. 22 months ago, a commercial satellite operated by a European imaging company completed a routine pass over the southern Iranian highlands and captured something that did not belong in a previous imagery pass 6 weeks earlier. A military-grade, paved road carved in a highland terrain, wide enough for heavy transport vehicles, leading toward a valley with no civilian infrastructure within 40 miles. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency flagged it within 72 hours. What followed was the most intensive layered intelligence collection operation run against an Iranian target in a decade. The NSA's SIGINT collection platforms began monitoring every radio frequency and encrypted transmission originating from the valley. Human intelligence sources inside the IRGC engineering division began reporting on personnel movements, supply deliveries, and construction timelines. Classified KH-series reconnaissance satellites, whose existence is not publicly acknowledged, began running dedicated passes over the site at every available orbit. And a Virginia-class fast-attack submarine designated CISN 792 departed its home port and transited the Strait of Hormuz on orders to hold a listening position in the Gulf for as long as the mission required. SSN 792 held that position for 63 days. Its N/BQQ-10 sonar system, operating in passive mode at depth, recorded the acoustic signature of heavy construction equipment operating underground, tunnel boring machines, explosive demolition charges, concrete pumping systems, vibrating through the rock and into the water column with enough consistency to allow analysts to map the facility's internal dimensions from the outside. The picture that emerged from 63 days of acoustic intelligence was cross-referenced against the SIGINT collection, the satellite imagery, and the human source reporting to produce a three-dimensional structural assessment of what Iran had built inside that mountain. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy had constructed a fully operational underground naval base, 600 feet of solid rock overhead, 3 concealed tunnel entrances behind blast doors engineered to mimic natural rock formations at satellite altitude, internal power generation, fiber optic communications buried 20 feet below the tunnel floor, fuel storage capacity for 60 days of sustained operations, and berthing for fast attack craft, midget submarines, and an autonomous surface drone fleet that the IRGCN had been quietly assembling for 18 months. The facility was designed with one operational purpose: to survive an American airstrike long enough to launch everything inside it at the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group operating in the Persian Gulf. The intelligence assessment delivered to the National Security Council 14 days ago was unambiguous. The facility was fully operational, fully stocked, and signals intercept from the previous 72 hours indicated it was preparing to execute its intended mission. The President authorized the strike package at 11:47 p.m. The B-2 Spirit departed Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri 21 hours before the strike. Its 2-pilot crew flew the outbound leg, supported by aerial refueling from KC. 135 stratotankers at pre-planned rendezvous coordinates over the Indian Ocean, a standard procedure for B-2 missions that require intercontinental range. By the time the aircraft entered the Persian Gulf region's airspace, its crew had been at the controls for 19 hours. This is not an operational limitation. Crew endurance on extended B-2 missions is a deliberate capability engineered into the platform from its initial design specification, because the targets the B-2 is assigned to destroy are never close to home. Iran's Integrated Air Defense System, the IEDS, was running at full operational readiness. The Qadam al-Anbiya Air Defense Base in Tehran was coordinating radar coverage from installations spanning the entire country. 300 PMU-2 batteries positioned along the southern coast were in active tracking mode. Radar installations at Bandar Abbas, Bushehr, and Jaraft were transmitting continuously on overlapping frequencies designed to eliminate coverage gaps. Fighter aircraft at 3 separate bases were on strip alert with pilots in the cockpit, ready to launch intercept vectors in under 4 minutes. Not one system in the entire IEDS detected the B-2. The reason is not electronic countermeasures. The B-2 carries no jamming systems for self-protection. It does not need them. The aircraft's survivability is entirely a product of its physical shape. A flying wing configuration with no vertical tail surfaces, engine inlets shaped to prevent radar energy from reaching the compressor faces, exhaust nozzles positioned above the wing to mask infrared signature, and an entire airframe coated in radar-absorbent material that converts incoming radar energy into heat rather than reflecting it as a detectable return. The result is a radar cross-section roughly equivalent to a large bumblebee. Iran's S-300 PMU-2 batteries are designed to engage targets with radar cross-sections down to 0.02 square meters. The B-2's radar cross-section is classified, but publicly available estimates place it well below that threshold. At 3:14 a.m., the B-2 entered Iranian airspace at 45,000 feet and began its ingress toward Grid Kilo 7. For 17 minutes, it flew over one of the most heavily defended air defense networks in the Middle East without generating a single radar return on any Iranian tracking system. The fighter pilots on strip alert at Bandar Abbas Air Base never received a scramble order. The S-300 operators tracking the sky to the north never acquired a contact. The Qadam al-Anbiya Coordination Center processed 17 minutes of clean radar picture and flagged nothing. At 3:28 a.m., the B-2's rotary launcher assembly rotated the first GBU-57 into release position and the weapons bay doors opened. The GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator is the largest aircraft-delivered precision-guided weapon in the United States arsenal. It is 30 feet long, weighs 30,000 pounds, and contains 5,300 pounds of AFX, 757 high explosive inside a blue 127 hardened steel penetrator casing engineered to punch through 200 feet of reinforced concrete before the fuse initiates detonation. The weapon was developed under a classified program specifically because the existing inventory, including the GBU-28 Bunker Buster, lacked sufficient penetrating mass to defeat a new generation of deeply buried hardened facilities that peer adversaries were constructing in Iran, North Korea, and China. Only 2 aircraft in the world can carry the GBU-57. The B-2 Spirit carries 2 of them in its internal weapons bay, the only configuration that preserves the low observable profile required to deliver them against defended targets. The weapons are so large that the B-2's rotary launcher assembly was redesigned specifically to accommodate them. The facility at Grid Kilo 7 had 600 feet of granite and limestone above its main operations chamber. The strike package called for 2 GBU-57 impacts sequenced 45 seconds apart. The first penetrator creating a cavity and shock fracturing the surrounding rock, the second following the damage path deeper toward the operations chamber before detonating. The first GBU-57 separated from the weapons bay at 3:28 a.m. and followed a GPS-guided ballistic trajectory calculated to impact the mountain face at the precise angle required to maximize penetration depth along the axis of the tunnel complex below. It impacted the Zagros Ridge at 3:31 a.m. and 0 seconds. The second weapon was already falling before the first one detonated. The GBU-57's AFX 757 warhead detonates inside the main operations chamber and releases 5,300 pounds of explosive energy in a space that was designed to be sealed and pressurized. The pressure wave has no open atmosphere to dissipate into. It travels outward through every connected tunnel passage simultaneously at the speed of sound through rock, 5 times faster than through air, compounding on itself as it reflects off tunnel walls and converges at junction points throughout the facility's internal network. The blast doors are rated to withstand the overpressure of a near miss from a conventional bomb detonating outside the mountain. They are not rated to withstand 5,300 pounds of AFX 757 detonating 30 feet behind them on the interior side. All 3 entrance blast doors exit their reinforced frames at approximately 800 miles per hour and become supersonic projectiles traveling outward from the mountain face. The initial detonation is not what destroys the facility. It is what initiates the sequence. The fuel storage section of the operations chamber holds 40,000 gallons of marine diesel, 60 days of operational supply for the fast attack craft and autonomous drone fleet berth inside. The pressure wave from the first GBU-57 ruptures every storage tank simultaneously. The diesel does not ignite immediately. At the temperature and pressure generated by the detonation, it aerosolizes, converting from liquid to a fine combustible mist suspended throughout the superheated air filling the tunnel system. The aerosolized fuel penetrates every passage, every chamber, every connected space inside the facility. The second GBU-57 arrives 45 seconds later. The detonation of the second weapon ignites the aerosolized diesel across the entire volume of the tunnel system simultaneously. This is a fuel-air explosion, the same detonation mechanism used in thermobaric weapons, occurring inside 600 feet of solid rock with no path for the energy to escape except outward through the fractured rock face above the operations chamber. The section of the Zagros ridgeline directly above the chamber does not crack progressively. The overpressure beneath it exceeds the structural load capacity of the fractured rock in a single pressure cycle. A section 300 feet wide and 200 feet tall separates from the ridge face and becomes airborne debris. The fire column that follows it through the opening is 300 feet in diameter and climbs to 8,000 feet above sea level before the fuel feeding it is exhausted. It is visible from the end/spy 6th thermal layer aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln 41 miles away, which is how Senior Chief Petty Officer Daniels sees it at 3:31 a.m. and 14 seconds and initially classifies it as Threat Track 1147. The fire burns for 11 minutes. When it stops, there's a crater 140 feet deep where the southern face of the Zagros Ridge used to be. Beneath thousands of tons of collapsed limestone and granite is what remains of the most sophisticated secret naval installation Iran ever constructed. While the BE-2 was on ingress toward Grid Kilo 7, 792 was already executing the second phase of the strike package from below the surface of the Persian Gulf. The targeting package transmitted to SSN 792 via ELF communication at 2:55 a.m. 36 minutes before the B-2 released its weapons, covered 7 secondary targets that the GBU-57s were never intended to destroy. 4 satellite communications relay stations embedded in the highland terrain surrounding the facility, used by the IRGCN to coordinate its surface asset network across the Gulf. 2 N/TPS equivalent mobile radar installations that have been providing air surveillance coverage over the southern approach corridor to Grid Kilo 7. And a hardened fiber optic switching node through which all encrypted traffic from the facility's communications network was routed to IRGC command centers in Bandar Abbas and Tehran. SSN 792 carried BGM-109E Tomahawk land attack missiles in its Mk-41 vertical launch system. The Block V variant, the most current production configuration, uses a combination of GPS, terrain contour matching, and digital scene matching area correlator guidance to achieve a circular error probable of less than 3 meters against fixed targets at ranges exceeding 1,000 miles. The Tomahawk does not require the submarine to surface. It does not require active radar emissions that can be detected by Iranian coastal surveillance systems. It exits the launch tube vertically, transitions to horizontal flight after clearing the water surface, drops to low altitude, and follows a pre-programmed terrain-following route that keeps it below Iranian radar coverage for the entire flight time and target. 7 Tomahawks launched from SSN 792 between 3:02 a.m. and 3:04 a.m., 29 minutes before the B-2 released its weapons. They were already in flight, following their terrain-masked routes towards 7 separate target coordinates, while the B-2 was still on ingress and the facility at Grid Kilo 7 was still operational. The first Tomahawk impacted its target at 3:31 a.m., the same minute the GBU-57 hit the mountain. The remaining 6 impacted their targets over the following 4 minutes. By 3:35 a.m., every satellite relay station, every mobile radar installation, and the fiber optic switching node were destroyed. Iran was not just blind from the B-2 strike. It was operationally severed, unable to assess damage, coordinate a response, or communicate between the strike site and its command structure through any channel that had not already been eliminated. At 3:44 a.m., the Iranian IDS reached full activation status. Every S-300 PMU-2 battery from Bandar Abbas to Bushehr went to active tracking mode simultaneously. Fighter aircraft from 3 bases were airborne and searching. The Qadam Al-Anbiya Coordination Center was processing maximum density radar returns from every transmitting installation in the southern network. There was nothing to find. The B-2 had been feet wet over the Gulf for 5 minutes. It was already outside Iranian radar range and climbing to cruise altitude on its return course to Missouri. The Iranian fighters searching the sky to the north were looking for an aircraft whose radar cross-section their systems cannot resolve at any range. On a course that their intelligence had no data to predict, at an altitude their intercept geometry could not have reached in time, even if they had known exactly where to look. Iran's public statement issued at 6:15 a.m. attributed the event at Grid Kilo 7 to a gas explosion at an unspecified industrial facility. The statement did not address the blast door fragments recovered by civilian shepherds 4 miles from the impact site. It did not address the magnitude 3.4 seismic event registered by monitoring stations across 3 provinces simultaneously. It did not address the 40-minute communications blackout across every military installation in the southern highland region. It did not address the thermal signature visible on commercial satellite imagery from low Earth orbit that no industrial gas explosion in the geological history of the Zagros range has ever produced. The statement was not intended to be believed. It was intended to buy time. Time for the IRGC to assess what had been lost. Time for the engineering teams to begin the damage assessment that the collapsed rock and missing blast doors were already making obvious. And time for the generals in Tehran to begin the conversation they did not want to have about how an installation buried under 600 feet of solid rock, concealed behind blast doors designed to appear as natural terrain, protected by the most sophisticated integrated air defense network in the Middle East, had been found, penetrated, and eliminated without a single radar contact, a single intercepted communication, or a single second of warning. The fire at Grid Kilo 7 went out at 3:42 a.m. By morning, Commercial satellite operators with imaging assets in low Earth orbit had tasked their platforms to the coordinates that Iranian state media was claiming were an industrial accident site. What their sensors showed was a crater 140 feet deep where the southern face of the Zagros Ridge used to be, a debris field extending 4 miles from the impact point, and a thermal residue signature consistent with the combustion of tens of thousands of gallons of fuel in an enclosed space. What the satellite imagery could not show was what was no longer there. The IRGCN fast attack fleet that had been berthed inside the facility. The autonomous surface drone swarms. The midget submarine contingent. The Fateh 110 ballistic missiles stored in the weapons base. The 60 days of operational supply. The encrypted communications infrastructure. The command and control nodes through which the facility was intended to coordinate a simultaneous multi-vector strike against the USS Abraham Lincoln strike group at the moment of Iran's choosing. All of it was under 140 feet of collapsed granite. The B-2 Spirit program costs approximately $45 billion across its 20 aircraft fleet. Each aircraft costs approximately $2 billion to procure and $3 million per flight hour to operate. The GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator costs approximately $3 million per unit. The total direct cost of the strike on Grid Kilo 7, 2 GBU-57s, 1B, 2 Flight, 7 Tomahawks from SSN 792 is approximately $30 million. Iran spent an estimated $3 billion constructing the facility over 18 months. The exchange ratio does not require further analysis. The strategic question the crater is asking is not about cost. It is about the conclusion Iran's military leadership is drawing tonight in the bunkers beneath Tehran, surrounded by satellite imagery of a mountain that should not be on fire and communications intercepts showing that every secondary target in the facility's support network was hit simultaneously by weapons that were already in flight before the B-2 released its payload. Iran's engineers built the facility to defeat American air power. They built it underground to defeat surveillance. They built it inside a mountain to defeat conventional bombing. They built the blast doors to survive over pressure. They built the communications network underground to survive electronic warfare. They built the air defense network to shoot down whatever was delivering the weapons. None of it intersected with the actual threat. The B-2 Spirit and the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator do not represent an evolution of conventional air power. They represent a capability specifically engineered to make the defensive logic of deeply buried hardened facilities irrelevant. To find what is hidden underground and destroy it with an aircraft that the defending radar network is physically incapable of resolving. Delivering a weapon that the defending rock structure is physically incapable of stopping. In Tehran tonight, the question is not what was lost. The loss is already cataloged. The question is whether anything Iran can build at any depth, behind any blast door, under any mountain, exists outside the reach of an aircraft with a radar cross-section the size of a bumblebee and a weapon that weighs 30,000 pounds and was designed for the sole purpose of going through whatever is in its way. The crater at Grid Kilo 7 is Iran's answer. And somewhere above the clouds, at 45,000 feet on a course that will never appear in any flight tracking database, a 2-pilot crew is eating cold sandwiches and watching the fuel gauges tick down toward Missouri. The N/Spy 6 aboard the Abraham Lincoln is still painting Grid Kilo 7 on its thermal layer. The bloom is fading now as the last of the fuel burns out in the collapsed tunnel system beneath the crater. Senior Chief Petty Officer Daniels watches the return diminish on his console, cancels Threat Track 1147, and returns his attention to the 847 other contacts the radar is actively managing across the Persian Gulf. The mountain at Grid Kilo 7 is no longer one of them.